This podcast is sponsored by Camera Museum of London and Tang Cigars of 44 Museum Street, London. Welcome to a Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lipman. Today we're interviewing Holly Penfield. Right, Holly, how are you feeling today?
Oh, I've been practicing the entire day. I went from piano singing, and I'm going into the archives of my songwriting because I've written about 500 songs in my life, and I have to try. And remember them. Like songs I wrote when I was 18, and they're actually quite good. So I have to go back into my history and try and find them, and then remember them. So I have to work out the chords again, and because there's so many songs that replace songs you've already written, and then you forget. So I've been doing that all day, and then I got bored and tired of it, so then I went and warmed my voice up, which I should have done before I started singing my old songs. And then I picked up the guitar and started practicing for a while, and because I'm new at this guitar stuff, so I have to practice it a lot. And it's hard. My sense of rhythm needs help and improvement, so I'm always practicing on the guitar. And then I went back to the piano again, and then back to the guitar, and then you called, and I put some lipstick on and a hat, and that's about it. Because it's lockdown, and nobody really cares what they look like right now. At least I don't. Sometimes I make an effort even when I'm home locked down, because it cheers me up to look in the mirror. Otherwise, I avoid mirrors and interviewers like you.
Indeed. Holly, I'd like to step into the past and explore hang on a second, I'm not quite sure, is that you or me? I'm on something needs to, oh, I see what the problem is. I was on auto and now I'm on manual, and so this is okay, fine. I'd just like to ask you about your past, and can you tell us, you were born in where you were born, and tell us about the first song you wrote and the first band members you met, perhaps at school.
Right. Okay, you asked for it. Let's see. My first song was when I was 12, and I did it for a patch to wear on my Campfire Girl costume, which is Campfire Girls was a Girl Guide kind of alternative, where it was based on the Native American Indian life, and it was a fantastic thing to be involved in. And there was an honor called the Torch Bearer honor, and you had to choose a category like cooking or sewing, which I had no interest in. Not that I don't have huge respect for anyone who it does, but I just wasn't good at any of that. But I was good at music, so I chose the music category, and one of the requirements was you write a song. So I already played guitar, ukulele, and then guitar. So I wrote a song about a little man who lived in the mountains and was in love with all the animals, and they loved him. And then he died, and then they all died because they were so sad and missed him so much. So that was my first song. But everybody loved it, and my gosh, I had to play it over and over and over again, year after year, until I wrote another song when I was 15 called The flowers grew up through the floor. And that actually got recorded by Macy's department store, which is another long story. And then the other question was, I was born in San Francisco area, in Oakland actually, and California. That's where I'm from, California. Somehow I came over here, and people often say, what are you doing here when you could be in California? But there's a lot of really not so great stuff that's happening in California these days. It's a bit safer here.
Yeah, I'm interested in your first song. Do you remember it? Can you sing it?
Let's see.
And at what age did you write the song?
I wrote it at the age of 12. And it went like this. Oh, sorry. Once on a high and windy hill, there lived a little man. He didn't have a thing in this whole wide world, but for him life was grand. He loved all the trees and the flowers and the bees. He loved all the sky and the sea. And that's why this little old man was as happy can be. So that was the first verse.
Well, how did you get the lyrics for the song? How did that come about, and when?
Who knows? I don't know. It just I don't know where that came from. I've never really asked myself that question since I wrote it, and I probably was asked that when I wrote it by my parents, like, how did you think that up, dear? And I don't know, it just came to me.
Tell us about...
I used to go every summer to a camp up in the mountains, and I had a very strong, powerful relationship with nature and animals, so maybe that's where it really stemmed from.
And how old were you then?
I went to that camp from the age of 8 to 16 every year for 3 weeks in the summertime.
And
that's where I played guitar, learned how to play guitar, and you know, sat around the campfire with all the other girls strumming our folk guitars.
Fantastic. And that was back in the 60s, right? In the early 60s.
Yes, it was. You're trying to find out how old I am. I know it.
No. Tell us about the song, your second song. How did you come up with the lyrics, and what was it called?
It was called "The Flowers Grew Up Through the Floor," and it went.
So can you tell us about the history of the song?
What?
Can you tell us about the history of the song? How did it come about?
It came about.
Maybe if you just mention the name of the song.
It's called "The Flowers Grew Up Through the Floor," and I had been singing with rock bands since I was about 13, and I think I wrote that song for the band, and then when I was 16, I got this job singing with Macy's department store with their rock band, and it turned into a television show, and they recorded us playing together, and that song that I wrote for the other band called "The Love Agency," it never got recorded, but when I joined this new band called the Fifth Street Exit, which was an exit in San Francisco City that you would go off to get into the city. It was very much appreciated and got as I say, recorded and then filmed me walking through the mountains of San Francisco with the fog coming in and me singing that song, which is called "The Flowers Grew Up Through the Floor." And yeah, I don't even think I can play it really hardly at all, but I could try. It's probably going to be too high for me. You can get it on you can get it on YouTube. It's on YouTube, the original recording. This is my husband Ian. Say hi. Okay, so let me see if I can think of it. Oh, that's going to be too high. Yeah, it's too high for me now. So, have you seen my love in the springtime when he takes us to paradise? I can't do it. I'll have to practice it. Sorry.
Can you tell us what happened to the song?
Well, it ended up being played. I can do it a cappella. How about? Let's see. There was 3 verses. One was, "Have you seen my love in the springtime when he takes us to paradise?" And his song blew my mind into endless time, and the days and the hours were no more, and the flowers grew up to the floor. And then there was, "Have you seen my love in the summer? And have you seen my love in the fall?" I guess there was all the seasons in the winter. And then I went, it was a really lovely song. It still is. If I'll have to relearn it for you. So it ended up on all the jukeboxes of the teen dress section of Macy's department store all over America. There was this, during that time, there was these little jukeboxes in the teen section. You could put in a token and hear songs while you were shopping. And so my song was in that jukebox, and it came on apparently every hour because I was getting a dress that I was supposed to wear because I went on a tour of Macy's department stores all over California, and I had to wear the same dress which came to perform in outside in the parking lot of Macy's, and it was this really cute velvet mini dress with all these little buttons down the front, and then it had lace cuffs. It was purple velvet dress, and very micro mini dress.
What was the reaction of the audience and all the kids at the time?
Oh, they loved it. The song, I don't know, it just was always such it was a beloved song. Although when I went up to get this dress and get permission to take it to the dressing room and change into it so that I could perform outside with the band, the girl said, "Oh my God, if that song comes on the jukebox once more, I'm gonna scream." She didn't know that I wrote it and that I was singing it, but she'd heard it about 500 times on the jukebox because she worked in the department.
and
That's just a funny memory I have of it.
This was whilst you were in your teens in California, and you were touring at that time and performing some music. What was school like for you? Were you a hard worker? Were you academically minded?
I couldn't bear school, and it's not good for all the children that might see this, but school was not for me. I was one of those kids. I suppose I had a fairly good mind for remembering things, but I had no interest at all in learning math or science. I loved the arts, so I was into the music department. I kind of loved literature, so I was reading the books that the teacher asked me to read and doing reports. But other than that, biology, as I say, I couldn't believe the people who were really good at it, and I respected them, but I just had no power of concentration to do any of it. And all I wanted to do was get out of school so that I could go sing professionally in nightclubs. And I was just a real misfit even back then. I did not fit into school. at all. And I would walk around the halls crying, you know, and my high school counselor got concerned because she thought maybe I was a teenage suicide candidate, but I wasn't. I just didn't. I did not want to be in school, but that's me. I don't recommend that for anybody else.
What were your grades?
Terrible. Oh, just terrible. Yeah, I got A's and B's in English and music and art, but all the rest D's and F's.
At what age did you leave school?
I left. I got out my senior year. They let me go, and I had a home studies teacher to get my high school diploma. But I left and went and sang in a nightclub in San Francisco every night for 6 months while all my classmates were going to school.
How old were you then?
I was 17.
Back then, who were your friends? Who would you count as your friends back then?
Oh my gosh! Well, I had long lifetime friends, that I'd known since we were babies, and then I had some school chums that I never lost track of. But back then, my friends were the people I worked with, like the band in the nightclub I was singing in. They were my friends. The girls that I was performing with, they were my friends. The guys I was dating, like the piano player across the street who across the street was the Playboy Club. He was the pianist who accompanied all the acts that came into the Playboy Club to perform. And he was 20 years older than me, but he was my boyfriend. I dated a critic for the San Francisco Chronicle. He was my friend. Yeah, and my parents were my friend. My family, they were always hugely supportive and used to come and see me sing in the nightclub all the time.
So back then it must have been maybe the mid-60s. Am I correct?
Late 60s, early 70s, yeah.
Late 60s, early 70s in California. And where was this taking place? Was it in Orinda, or were you moving around in San Francisco back then?
I was in Orinda till where my school was and the family house was. But once I started performing in the city, I eventually moved to Haight-Ashbury, which is where all the hippies lived. But that was a little bit later. I just lived at home and drove into the city all the time and did lots and lots of gigs with strange people in strange places.
Do you recall any specific stories where maybe you got into trouble, or there was some excitement, or something happened on the way to a gig or during a gig back then?
Because my parents were incredibly liberal, I did not betray them by doing all the drugs that all my peers were doing, and they were doing a lot. They were doing LSD, they were doing smoking tons of pot, and I did try a few things now and again, but I was very, very lucky that it just didn't interest me that much. It just didn't interest me. I was so obsessed with my music, just like I am now, and it was quite difficult to go and perform every night with a rock band, and then I was still writing my own music during the day. And I also had a couple of boyfriends that really looked after me and didn't let me get into the drug culture. I was also dating a very cute, adorable British guitar player who'd come from London to find his fortune in the San Francisco scene musically, and he did eventually. He did really well, and he was the one who kept me from really doing bad drugs, and as I said, I was just very lucky. And I didn't want to betray my parents' liberal trust in me, you know.
So who was the guitarist, and how did you meet him?
John Hart was his name, and I met him through another singer I met, a guy named Chicken. And Chicken and John Hart formed a band called Little John, and it grew and grew, and I went up to, they asked me to open a show for them up in the countryside in this big auditorium, and I said, Holly, come and play, half hour's worth of songs on your guitar while and open the show for our band. So I did, and John and I met that night, and it was like lightning bolts. It was so heavy, really heavy. Love.
Right. Back in school, I'm just wondering whether you can highlight any specific memories or stories that you'd like to tell us in conjunction with your music, or maybe the relationship with your teachers or friends at the time. Is there anything you specifically remember, like good or bad, or both?
The only thing that kept me happy at school was the music department. So every year we had a big talent show, and although the music people weren't so keen on me doing like the leads in musicals, because that's a big thing in America. I don't know if it is here, but you perform, you put together these musicals, and you get cast in the parts, and I never got cast in the really good leading parts. I'd have maybe a sub part. But one thing that I did do was enter the talent contest for the entire school every year, and I won every single time, hands down. It was my, every time, it just worked for me. There wasn't anyone who could compete with what I was doing. I don't even remember what I was doing, but it really got to the hearts of the teachers and the student body. So I think one year I didn't do it because I thought, I'll let somebody else win. That sounds very arrogant, but it's what I was good at, and so I won all 3 years that I entered, and that gave me a great deal of confidence that I wouldn't have had. But the structure of school tore my confidence down because I had no interest in academia, and I got terrible grades, and the teachers were upset with me because they knew I wasn't stupid, but I just could not apply myself. So that kind of eroded my confidence in doing anything but music. And it solidified it at the same time, So I knew at a very early age that I was going to be in music forever. Nothing else could compare to it.
Do you remember? Yeah, interesting. Do you remember the first day you left home?
I didn't really leave home ever. I was always back at the house because I couldn't afford the rent anymore, or I broke up with my boyfriend and came home. I never really left home. No, that never happened. My parents were my best friends, so and that back then, actually, that was quite unusual. I think it's a lot more common these days that families and parents are close with their kids, but maybe I'm wrong about that too. I don't know.
Can you describe a typical dinner you had when at home back in?
My mother was just a terrible cook, and she ran a shop. She ran an art gallery shop, a frame shop, and she worked all day long very hard. And my dad was out selling property, and her cooking was terrible. 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 She burnt everything. She had no interest in it at all. So.
And were there any other family members?
Well, my sister, but she left. She was 8 years older than me, so she left pretty early, got married, and she was a brilliant cook still. Well, she's died now, but she was a total chef almost.
And
opposite me.
do you remember what you were discussing at the table?
Well, that's a weird question. Why would you ask
that? But just picture yourself back at home, back in the day. Do you remember, a specific discussion or argument, or maybe you were talking about politics or music or something, or maybe a guest came over? Do you remember anything?
Well, my parents, I don't need to keep raving about them, but they were fascinating people, fascinated with life, and everybody that came to the house, like when we had guests staying with us, or when someone would come to dinner, the conversations would get quite interesting, about politics, art, music, personalities and people, and how they fit into the world and how they don't fit into the world. Like me, I was a big subject because everyone in my family, all my cousins and uncles and aunts on both sides of my dad and mom, were highly educated, and I turned my back on it all and became the misfit of the family. And they never made me feel bad about it. They made me feel good about it. And so I was very fortunate, and they were intellectuals, basically, liberal intellectuals who loved to sit around the dinner table and talk about anything and everything. But it did often go towards politics because there was wars on, like Vietnam was on at the time, and my sister and her husband were arguing with my dad. Basically, my dad, who was a conservative, he was liberal. He was liberal about life, but when it came to war, he fought in World War II, so he was for Vietnam, and those arguments were terrible between my brother-in-law and him. My brother-in-law, I don't think he went to Vietnam. No, he didn't go to Vietnam, but he could have gone if he wasn't smart enough to get out of it.
Do you remember the specific discussion? Do you remember anything that was said?
No. Just, no, don't remember.
Tell us about the time where you met Mike Chapman and Nicky Chin. How did that happen? Did they see you? Did you see them? Oh, so we're fast forwarding a few years, after your teens, and that's of course we want to discuss, from your teens to your early 20s. What was your musical direction there? Were you writing songs? Were you gigging? Was there original music? What was the feedback? Did you, meet with, or were you seen by, people from Elektra Records, or maybe did you bump into Jim Morrison or something like that? Tell us a bit about that.
When I was 18, I had worked in this nightclub in San Francisco every night doing top 40 music, and I made pretty good money, and it wasn't my cup of tea. I just wanted to get out and be on the stage, but I knew I was supposed to be writing music. And I had trained with a very famous vocal coach. Her name is Judy Davis, and she coached Barbra Streisand and Sammy Davis Jr. And she even saw Frank Sinatra occasionally, and Janis Joplin. She loved me, and she trained me to be a nightclub singer. So I was a nightclub singer.
What were you singing?
But in my heart, I was a singer-songwriter from way back. And once I saw a couple of performers like Joni Mitchell and Laura Nyro, who nobody knows about here, but she was an unbelievably inspiring singer-songwriter back then. And I decided I've got to be like Laura. Not like her, but she's my inspiration. She lived in New York, so I took all the money I'd saved and I went to New York and lived there for 3 months in the YWCA in Times Square. And just so I could be near Laura Nyro, or Nero. It's up for grabs how she pronounces her last name. And she used to take buggy rides around Central Park, and I thought maybe I'd run into her in Central Park. So while I was there for that 3 months, I wrote my first serious batch of songs on the piano in the recreation room at the YWCA in New York. And I managed to write 20 songs. Now, whether they were any good, I don't know. I came home and my parents were, what are we going to do with Holly? And when they heard this body of songs, they said, okay, we saved up money to send you to college. So now, instead, we're going to give you the money so that you can pursue your heart's desire, which is writing music. And that was a journey in itself. It took me 7 years of writing and performing all over the Bay Area with all my original music. And I had 2 bands during that time. It took me 7 years to get to Los Angeles because I couldn't get a record deal in San Francisco, no matter how hard I tried. I went down to LA in my mid-20s, and I lived there for about a year and a half, and then gave up and came back to San Francisco. And then when I was 26, somebody gave a demo tape that I had made down there to Mike Chapman. And Mike Chapman heard it and flew me in a plane from San Francisco down to LA at his expense. Wined and dined me, told me he wanted me to join a band of his that he was putting together. So that's how it all started.
Do you remember the song, the demo song? Can you sing it to us?
No. I think it was called something like Rock and Roller Coaster. There was Rock and Roller Coaster, and then there was another song called Please Don't Bang on That Piano. And then there was another song called Long Live Our Love. Oh, and there was another song called Differently. So yeah, no, I had a little band down there that I recorded some things with called the Pickles, and I think that was that demo that Mike Chapman heard.
Do you still have access to that demo?
No.
Could you find it in any way? Surely it must be somewhere.
No, honey, I don't.
Okay, so you were flown to Los Angeles. Do you remember what you were thinking in the plane? On the plane?
No, I just was so excited. Wow, somebody's paying me to go to Los Angeles. You know, I was still very beaten up by trying to acquire a record deal in my early 20s and knowing I was good and just never had that lucky break. So it seemed like a dream come true, even though it came later than I wanted. You know, it was like, whoa, could this be the beginning? And it was the beginning of a proper record deal. It started out as a publishing deal where I was writing music for Nicky Chin and Mike Chapman in their production company. And then within 6 months, it turned into a proper record deal where I got advance money and everything. And I was in the studio, and they hired a band for me and paid the band for 2.5 years. They paid my band an amazing salary. Of course, I would have had to pay it all back in the end. But that whole situation, which took me to about 27 or 28 it collapsed under my feet. I had one record released, and then the next one I made and spent 6 months on with Mike producing ended up in a vault somewhere yet to be found.
Do you remember at the time what you were offered? Do you remember the actual conversation that you had with Mike and Nikki at any point um, just before you signed? What did they say to
Well,
you?
I'll tell you what did happen, which I didn't want to bring up, but because it maybe isn't. Hello.
Yeah,
There
I
you
can
go.
hear you.
It's, but I think maybe it might be apropos for people who, are trying their best to be in the music business. Although everything's changed now, so I don't know what the criteria is now. But Mike had envisioned me joining this band, so I indeed went and met all the people in the band. There were three girl singers who were up front. One had black hair, one had blonde hair, and one had red hair. And the three of us got to do solo songs, and then we did harmonies. And occasionally I went over to the piano and played the Don't Bang on the Piano song that I wrote. And so I basically started getting ill while it was happening. I mean, inside, I was feeling so down and depressed about the band. Instead of being excited and happy and signing a contract where they were giving me $10,000, I just felt horrible about the situation. I didn't really believe in the band. So I finally couldn't stand it anymore. And I went to Mike and said, I can't do this, Mike. I just can't do it. And he goes, are you sure? It's an amazing opportunity. And I said, I know, but it feels wrong to me. I've got to pursue my own thing. And I don't feel, oh, we'll let you do a lot of stuff. And I went, it's just not right for me. So I left. I went back to San Francisco with my tail between my legs. Well, he was pretty pissed off at me in the end, and I didn't think I'd ever see him again. And then I got Then I went back down for another reason to LA from San Francisco with another person that was interested in me about a year later. And my father said to me, Holly, just go visit Mike Chapman and just call a meeting. So I called him up. He said, Holly, come on in to the office. Their offices were on Sunset Boulevard. And I went in and sat down in the chair, and I went, oh my God, what am I going to say to Mike? And the first thing he says to me is, Holly, how did you know that band was a disaster? And apparently that year that I was separated from that situation, it went down the tubes. They couldn't get along with each other. The music was crap, and it all ended horribly wrong with him spending a fortune on it. So he was so impressed that I knew it was a disaster before he did. That's when he signed me.
Interesting. And what did he sign you to do?
To be a songwriter for their production company and to develop me as an artist. And when he thought I was ready, then he'd let me make a record. So I didn't quibble or question. I just said, I'll take it,
Do you remember the first song that you wrote for them, and how did that happen? And can you sing it to us?
It's called Hit. It's called Hit. It's 2:45. I wish this guy would hit on me, or something like that. It wasn't a great piece of art, trust me, but it was cute, and it was well produced by my co-writer. I was writing with somebody by then. And we produced it, and it was kind of cool. It was a pop song because that's what they were about then. And I wrote a lot of pop songs because I realized then that I couldn't do the really arty thing and make a living. And there was a little point in my career where I needed to make money and to respect myself and to not sponge off my parents, who would probably have let me done it for the rest of my life. But so I ended up trying to write a hit song for Michael and Nikki, a formula kind of thing. So I wrote that's why I wrote so many hundreds of songs, trying to learn how to write a hit song according to Mike and Nikki. And it worked. It worked very well. As a matter of fact, I kind of lost, sadly, a bit of my originality. It took me a while to get back to the more original Holly in my 30s, you know, but in my 20s it was all about pop music.
Do you remember any, were they helping you write the songs at the time? Do you remember the process?
Mike and Nikki, you know, they co-wrote all these songs, and they were busy writing, and eventually down the line I did end up co-writing a few things with Mike, which I can't remember, and quite a lot of songs with Nikki Chin, which some of them I still even do and perform. So, but they, like I said, the whole company collapsed, and both of them really had slight mental breakdowns. So it was a tough time too.
Were you living in Los Angeles back then?
I was, yeah.
And I suppose you were writing music, but what about everything else? Were you going to parties? What was your lifestyle like back in the day? Did you meet a lot of the artists they were working with, or how did that work out there?
I did a lot of work. I was a worker, not a player. And probably I would have done better if I'd been a player. And gone on the casting couch with everyone, which I didn't. I met some really lovely people like Bernie Taupin and Joni Mitchell through Mike. Mike introduced me to a lot of famous people because that's what he did, you know, although he was also a workaholic too. Barely ever left the studio. He was in the studio from morning till night, late at night. But I did meet lots of famous people in Hollywood, which is probably another interview down the line.
Do you still keep in touch with any of them?
No, I can't think of one. I mean, they remember me though. Of course, they would remember me, and I know who they are, but I no, you just lose track. You lose track. Life goes on, and especially when I moved from Hollywood to London.
Yeah, tell us about that. How did that happen? So, look, I mean, the company went down the drain.
I think, honey, that's another interview.
Okay, briefly, and this is, let me say that this is, I may be asking some of these after the lockdown. I'd like to do another interview with better audio and all of that. I think that would be very, very useful, especially for a future documentary. And it would be great to get some archive footage as well from the time, maybe pictures of exactly what you were talking about, the people, the music, what your influences were back in California. But now, just very quickly, maybe just for a few minutes, can you tell us how on earth did you get in? You moved to London, you worked on a record, you fell in love. Maybe you could tell us about that, and then also how that bridged to the jazz and cabaret scene, which is,
that's just a long story. I think I'm too tired to do that right now.
Okay, so just a couple of minutes, just briefly telling us, because I've got this 5-minute footage that I got from YouTube of a showreel of yours depicting you sitting on a couch.
Yeah, I know the one.
Yes, right. So this is very interesting. This
you wanted to talk about my evil twin, yeah.
A little bit. How on
There's
earth
a whole lot in between that. It's just so, till I get to the evil twin, which is in my 40s. There's still my 30s when I was doing the Fragile Human Monster show that you saw on James Whale, and then it moves into the 40s, into the black hair and the jazz and the cabaret. But there's a whole Yeah, there's a lot. If we started talking about that, the reason I went, I moved to London is I went to London. I got finally a second record deal in Los Angeles after Mike and Nikki's company collapsed. I got a second record deal with MCA Records, and I talked the A&R guy and my manager into letting me go to London to find an eclectic record producer, because I wanted to do a more eclectic, arty thing, and this time around. So I found a guy named Ian Ritchie. And,
How did you find him?
Well, I don't remember. It was I had some guidance from my record label, and I talked to some A&R people at the MCA branch and at Virgin Records at the time, and you just and management. I know what it was. There was a management company that only managed record producers, and we went to them, and they said, well, we've got a guy named Ian Ritchie who's amazing. He uses the computer, the Fairlight computer, and there's only one other guy who does that. And I said, well, I want to meet both of them. So I met both of them, and it was Ian that I really wanted, although the other guy was really good too. But I could tell Ian had this weird thing that I liked. It was a weird and quirky guy, like the David Lynch of record production, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember who the other guy was?
Andy Richards.
And so you started making music with Ian Ritchie back in the day?
Yes, and I talked my company into hiring him. I went to London to make the record, and it was in this big warehouse right on Wapping Wall river. It was on the river. You could open the doors up, and there was the river, and it had all these weird antiques in it, and it had this big Fairlight computer, and we spent 3 weeks programming the album, and then we replaced the programming with real musicians in the recording studio. And in that 6 weeks that I was in London, we fell in love really deeply and profoundly, and yeah, it hasn't stopped.
I heard one song, a demo that I think is unreleased from the album Session. Is that a song? I mean, how did you get that deal in the first place? Was there a demo that you produced back in Los Angeles that you sent someone, or?
Yeah, I had a manager that was very, let's say he was like a real manager type, you know, very. I don't know.
Do you remember anything he said? Was he big? Was he?
He was famous. He had managed a group called Styx. Styx. It was a corporate band, a big corporate band like Foreigner. He managed that kind of band, and he was had a lot of connections. And he went to Irving Azoff, who was the head of MCA Records, and says, "I've got this singer-songwriter that I think is just powerfully amazing." It was actually the wrong company to be signed to. They weren't really interested in eclectic singer-songwriters like me, but they thought we should have one, so we'll make Holly our token one, you know. But they didn't know what to do with me, and so I knew what to do, and I went to London and found this producer, and but I was signed by Irving Azoff, and it was basically because Jim Cahill was his name, talked Irving into it, and Irving heard one song that he, on a demo that he thought was amazing, which was called "It's Always Been You." It was a ballad, and he said, that is a hit. That's a stone cold hit. But in the end, that all went horribly wrong. So,
Why?
And the record deal, I got dropped from the record label eventually.
Why?
Well, it was because my manager and my A&R guy were doing a lot of cocaine together and partying and doing their LA kind of Hollywood thing. And my A&R guy eventually got fired. And then, I was like a piece of dead wood that no one wanted to be involved with. So I got dropped.
But what about the music? Did anyone at the label hear the music that you produced with Ian?
I had a
and what about that hit, that song you thought was a hit? What happened to that?
Well, I had a publishing deal with their sister company. So it was called Uni City or something like that. And they gave me advance money too. So I had advance money from there and advance money from MCA. And when the record got shelved, after all that, going to London and get, my manager and I fell out about it, and I was just a victim of circumstances that really I didn't have a lot to do with. And I decided that I had to appeal to the company in a heart way. So I managed to get Irving Azoff on the phone, which is like trying to get a hold of God back then. He answered the phone, or he took my call, and I said, Irving, I just recorded 10 songs for you, and now the record is shelved, and all those songs, I can't re-record them, and they're my babies. I need those songs, including the one you like so much. I've got to have them back, and I was pretty much in tears. So he said, okay, Holly, I'll give them back to you, which was very rare, because he was a real shark, Irving Azoff, and a real businessman, and everyone said he didn't have a heart. But for me, he did, and he gave me back all those songs that I had mastered. That's what you call it. You master a record with a record company back then. And they're not your songs. For 5 years, they own them. But he gave them back to me, and then I was on my own again.
Right.
But I didn't give up. I got another record deal in Canada eventually. Anyway, I'm exhausted. Remembering all this stuff is hard. And besides, Ian's doing his live broadcast right now, so I have to go on.
Tell me just very briefly, how did you get into the cabaret scene? So for about 10 years, when you were in your 30s, you did this Human Fragile Monster show, which also got on to James Whale, 2 songs. But then that fizzled out somehow. But what was the transition between that and the cabaret, and why specifically cabaret?
Well, it was just that I never made great money. I actually toured with that. It was a one-woman show with a big synthesizer and me. And I toured Europe. I toured Italy. You'd think that it would go somewhere, but it didn't. And I didn't get signed by a bigger label, which is what I dreamt about. Never happened. So in my 40s, I was asked by my partner to earn some money. He was tired of funding this art project. So I went and started singing jazz.
Now, whose idea was it to sing the jazz?
Well, I knew how to do it, and I went to jams and sat in occasionally just for fun. And everyone went, wow, Holly, you know how to sing jazz. Oh, you should do that. So I did that, and it took off like wildfire. And then, which is unusual because most jazz singers don't take off. But I had a rock chick mentality when I was performing the songs, and I became the outrageous jazz singer. And then the gays discovered me, and I became the outrageous cabaret jazz singer, or jazz cabaret singer. And I was able to leap around the room and jump on people's heads and sit in their laps and all this rock chick stuff that I knew how to do, being a rock chick. And it just stirred up everybody here in London. It was, and also broke through the British Reserve. This crazy American girl, and underneath the black wig that I had adorned on me was all the blonde hair, hidden away. And I didn't regret it though. I don't regret it, but it did take it took 20 years of my life not being the singer-songwriter. So now I'm back, and I'm not giving up. I never really gave up anyway. I was always sneaking in one of my original songs along the way.
Yeah, and some people even filmed you, and you've got this sort of movement there that looks, very much like you're on a stage, on a huge stage, very much a rock sort of movement. I'd like to know, actually, just going back a bit, do you remember the time where you were asked to do jazz cabaret? What happened then? You said you maybe met someone, or did the idea come along, or how exactly did that happen?
It was just an evolution of, I was just singing in this a Chinese restaurant that...
Do you remember the name?
China Jazz on Parkway. And there were always people coming in. I mean, George Michael came in one night, and I sang with him and sat on his lap, and he and I sang "Killing Me Softly" together. There was a guy who ran this gay club around the street called the Black Cat, and he came to eat there one night and fell in love with what I did and said, "You could sing in my clubs." And he managed about 3 gay clubs all over London, and so he started employing me. And then all these other gay men started employing me, either for private parties or in their clubs. And yeah, there was a guy named Paul Richardson who had opened about 5 different nightclubs in Soho, and he started hiring me and featuring me in all his clubs. And they let me bring a live band with me, which made all the difference. I had a band, and we were hot, and we just rocked the place. We didn't actually do rock music. We did very high energy, sort of cabaret jazz music, like Big Spender, and I've Got Rhythm, and I've Got You Under My Skin, but we do them in really pumping, aggressive ways. Summertime, Mac the Knife, New York. It just went on and on, but we did them with a lot of energy and aggressiveness. I'm just belting everything out, and then we take it down to a really intimate ballad, and which is what the guys loved, was the way I sang ballads too. So with all this emotion, and so it was an accidental career move, totally. So, and it worked though, and I had fun. Oh, I had so much fun.
And was it the same band all the time, or were they?
Pretty much. They were the kind of players though that could play anything as long as I put a chart in front of them. They didn't memorize all the chords, but they were just amazing players. So I had like about 5 bass players to choose from, and 5 pianists and 5 drummers. But I usually used the top 2 if I could get them. And I could, because I could pay them. I mean, I could offer them employment other than, playing in jazz bands, which never paid, or musicals in the West End, which wasn't very exciting, So we had lots of fun, all of us. If you talk to any of those guys, they'd say, "Oh my God, life with Holly was wild."
So and it evolved, right? Then you went into another direction. Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Well, I went from the small clubs to bigger clubs, and then I started getting booked in proper hotels, and eventually I was booked into the Savoy, because the guy who ran the Savoy part that hired had seen me in a little gay club in Soho and just loved me and was a big fan. And then my agents were also had this contract with the Savoy to supply all the music for the Savoy. So I was the proper choice, and I was there for 3 years, and it was amazing. I did amazing things and had amazing celebrities come in and see me sing at the Beaufort Bar. And my goodness, I'm never in my wildest dreams did I think any of that was going to happen, and it did, you know. And it's not even possible for things like that to happen anymore, like at the Savoy anyway, because the people running the Savoy aren't interested in the more old jazz, cabaret, retro scene that I was into. And also that scene led me into the underground cabaret world, which was extremely avant-garde and strange, and that appealed to me. So between the posh gigs that I got to do and the gay gigs I got to do in Soho, and then I was also doing these weird underground gigs in the East End and all over the place where, you know, I could really do some strange stuff. I loved it. I used to sing My Funny Valentine, for instance, was a classic jazz standard, and I'd go to the butcher and I'd get 3 lamb hearts, and I would juggle them while I was singing, and I would wear some big stupid wedding dress that I got in a charity shop, and the blood would go all over the dress, and it was just great, you know. I was very encouraged. The stranger I got, the more they liked it. And I had a dress made for me that had a cascade of razor blades that went all the way down to the floor in the front of the dress. And the designer was like, up to the minute I put it on, he was like trying to dull all the blades, you know. And then he made me a veil that was made out of razor blades. It was called my cutting edge cabaret dress. I mean, I could go on and on about, and I have just somebody's right now is just took thousands of pictures of me during that time, and he's sending them all to me now. So it actually makes me miss my evil twin a bit, but that's okay, because I'm so happy doing my own music again, and I got to do that for a while.
Tell us what are the challenges of making your own music? What happened? How did that evolve? And what's happening in the future?
Well, I just always known that I know how to write heartfelt songs, and it's time for me to try and get them to the public again. And that's all it is. I'm just reviving a lot of songs I've already written, and then I've written some new songs that I think are also very strong. And it's important this time in my life to get my music to the public. And if they don't want to hear it, I'll accept that, and I won't give up. I'll just reinvent myself back into maybe the evil twin, or who knows. But I've got to do this now. It's just a calling inside myself. It's like, you know, I gotta learn how to meditate, or I gotta start doing yoga, you know. I've got to do this. And for 20 years, I was so successful at the jazz cabaret but inside there was a voice going, I got to get back to my songwriting. I've got to get back. And man, oh man, it came like a vengeance in the end, and I had to do it. And it's a calling inside me. It's this deep yearning, and I can't ignore it anymore. This is my time of life right now. I have to do it, just like I had to do it in my teens, you know. So I don't know.
It's a full circle.
I'm a crazy, misguided person, probably.
And you've recorded songs. You were performing them. Do you think you need to? Let's just think about the day, back in the day. You met lots of people who had lots of connections. How is that going to happen? I mean, do you need to go out and start playing gigs like they used to do in the 60s, and then you get recognized, or or is it as simple as just meeting someone who's got lots of connections and then hooking you up and hooking your music to various platforms in different ways, or to other musicians?
I'm sure in this modern world there is that solution, which is meeting the right person, and like I met Mike and Nikki in my 20s, and then that person trying to make a star out of that person, like say whoever discovered Adele and made her into a star. I'm sure that there's still that happening. I don't know if it would happen for me. I mean, obviously I'm a vintage person, and they might not see any potential for me having a long lifetime career, but a couple of hits, and you know, usually that's what artists are lucky to have, is 2 or 3 hits, and then their career is not always continued. I mean, Lady Gaga, of course, reinvents herself all the time, but she doesn't have hits all the time, and that's what the companies are interested in, that still sign acts and try and make stars out of them. I don't know. I don't know. I think performing live is a terrific way to do it. It's so strong, a way to get people interested in your work. And I also think that the internet is a whole new arena that none of us quite understand as musicians and record company people and business people. None of us quite understand how it works, but I think Billie Eilish has built her following, which has ended up in a proper record deal and a proper company backing her and all that bloody stuff. But she had a big following before any of that happened through the internet. So it's all a big mystery in my world anyway. If anyone can tell me about how there's a formula, you know, for the success of a record, I'd like to hear it.
Well, you've certainly got the songs, and I think what could happen, in my opinion, is that after the lockdown, you know, is you need to group together some people that will connect with you musically, and just go out there very simply performing gigs.
Well, that's what I'm planning to do. So let's get anybody out there who's listening to this very long, tedious interview about my weird life, which is a lot weirder than I I'm going into tonight. I'm just giving you the basic stuff. Please come to my gigs, because oh my gosh, you won't regret it. I am the craziest performer probably you'll ever see, besides, well, I can't think of anyone that's as nutty as me. Maybe Lady Gaga. She's pretty nutty. A lot of people think that she saw me in the cabaret days and all my crazy costumes and my shoe hats, because I was very into surrealist costumes. But I don't think so. She's just a nutty little arty chick like me.
Indeed. Is there anything you'd like to say? Or maybe you can perform a song or something, or just a couple of words, or something that has inspired you, that you've written, like to tell us before
Yeah, so I can do Tree Woman, sort of. I can't.
Tell us about Tree Woman. How did that originate?
Well, it originated because I was thinking, how am I going to do an album full of songs? Where do I start? What do I do? And I was on a plane to California to see my dad, and I saw this movie about this big giant tree that this kid was talking to all the time, and I thought, he really loves that tree, and I really love trees. It started out with me loving trees, but then I realized that wasn't enough, so I got into this, I'm a tree, and I'm a a big tree now with a lot more limbs and bark on my face, the lines and everything. It's like I'm a big vintage tree, and I'm better than I ever was when I was younger. So then I realized that was kind of a way to start a new record. So that's why the record is called Tree Woman. And all the songs on the record have been carefully chosen to sort of go into that evolution. So I'm a tree woman now, in the heart of my bark. Well, it's really out of tune, isn't it? Can you hear the music upstairs?
Oh yeah, in the background. Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay, I'll just do like a couple of verses. I'm not gonna do the whole thing. I'm a tree woman now, in the heart of my bark. Well, what's my thinking in the warmth of my heart? Yeah, I'm trying to resist, wanting to erase all the lovely branches. It's to my face. I'm a walking work a tree on, it's no disgrace. I'm a tree woman now. I'm a tree woman now. No more fragile twigs of youth. And I got these long, strong limbs that you can climb out on to get to the ripest fruit. Yeah, the tree doctor's always looking for my rocks. The undertaker's eye made a plan, made his plots. But life's too good to have and have not. I'm a tree woman now. I never wanted to be a pretty little magazine, paper cutie. No, I've always had the same fantasy to be a weird and wacky, come on, God, documentary. I'm a tree woman now, and when you're smooth and being born, I'm gonna save you from life's heat and shelter you from love's storm. And I'm hanging up my hats, grinding my boots, and when I lose my leaves, I still got my roots. I'm a walker, work a tree on, that's a bargain true. I'm a tree woman, tree woman. I am a tree woman now. Yeah, 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 yeah. I am a tree woman now. Yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by Camera Museum of London and Tang Cigars of 44 Museum Street, London. Thank you for listening to a Fish Out of Water podcast. This is your host, Richard Lipman. Should you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please get in touch.